On the frozen slopes of Mount Light, Rhea, the fierce princess of the Bai clan, sits locked in a wooden cage. Standing in the blizzard is the man who put her there. Julian, her first love, and the mastermind who just slaughtered her entire tribe. Months ago, he was a frail hostage she saved from a wolf pack. She gave him her heart. He used it to steal her nation's secrets. As a gleaming dagger flashes in the snow, Rhea takes her last breath, and the brilliant traitor vanishes forever. Was it cold-blooded betrayal, or a dark secret buried in the ice? In the dead of winter, the world lay wrapped in silver. From the Great Marsh River in the south to Mount Buron in the north, everything was an endless, immaculate white. It was then that Princess Eleanor, sent from the Great Chu Empire as part of a marriage alliance, arrived in the Beishi nation. With her came not only scarlet bridal finery that stretched for miles and more than 100 attendants, but also a hostage. Julian Shu, the son of the great general who defended the realm. The Khan ordered Leo to keep a close watch on him. But when Rhea saw how pale Julian looked, she scoffed at the Khan's command. Someone that sickly, what trouble could he possibly cause? Leo probably thought the same, so the duty naturally got pushed onto Rhea. Rhea, however, didn't take orders. She was a Baishi princess. No one dared rein her in. She spent several days hunting on Mount Buron. On her way back, she passed Lake Atamu and spotted a lone figure fishing in the quiet. Only then did she remember what Leo had told her. The wind and snow showed no sign of easing. Rhea swung down from her horse and sat beside him. She watched the line vanish into the frozen lake and let out a cold laugh. "You know this is pointless, right?" Julian's face was tucked into his rain cape, a thin layer of snow gathering on top. "It's fine. I just like the feel of this place." Rhea curled her lip. "What are you even talking about? Always with the fancy phrasing." The snow thickened, falling in heavy clumps like pulled cotton. A few flakes slipped into her collar, melted, and ran down her neck. Rhea rubbed her nose and sneezed. When she looked up again, a conical hat had appeared over her head, covering the little girl's ears, red from the cold. Rhea held the brim. She didn't take it off right away, but she insisted, "I'm not cold." Julian's expression remained calm. "I know, I'm the one who's warm." Rhea tipped her head, studying him. After a long moment, she muttered, grudging, "Fine, then," as if she were the one being wronged. Seeing her delicate brows knot together, Julian couldn't help laughing. "Princess, your speech from the Central Plains is very good." Rhea brightened at once. "Of course it is. The Baishi nation is going to rule the Central Plains one day. Naturally, I have to speak their language." Julian only kept smiling. He looked at her and shook his head. "That's not a sure thing." Rhea's temper flared instantly. She wanted to kick him into the lake, but he looked so frail she figured one kick might finish him. Instead, she grabbed a handful of snow and shoved it down his collar. Julian was bedridden for more than half a month afterward. The next time she saw him was at the Nadamu gathering. Leo said the man chosen as the greatest warrior this time might one day become Rhea's husband. Leo was never proper. He nudged Rhea and insisted she pick someone she liked from the crowd of bare-chested young men. Rhea wasn't shy in the least. Her gaze swept over them, and that was how she spotted Julian among the people. Leo followed her stare and teased. "Sure, he's good-looking, but with a body like that, he might not even make it through winter. What do you think?" Rhea remembered what Julian had said back at Lake Atamu. She puffed out her cheeks and said fiercely, "Right, he can't." In the Baishi nation, any day without snow was a good day. 2 days earlier, Leo had kept Rhea from going out, and she'd been stifled to the point of misery. The moment the sky cleared, she brought out her horse, planning to hunt on Mount Buron. As it happened, when she passed Julian's tent, she ran into him just as he lifted the flap and stepped outside. That day, the Nadamu gathering had only been halfway through when the wind and snow worsened. Julian, bundled in layers, had apparently caught another chill. Remembering that, Rhea reined in and lowered her gaze to him. Surprised, she said, "You're actually out today?" Julian pressed his lips together, then smiled at her. "Princess, what refined hobbies." Rhea had always hated how people from the Central Plains spoke with such delicate polish. She snapped her whip, her horse shrieked and stamped beside Julian, splashing him with snow. Only then was she satisfied. Julian lifted a hand and brushed the snow away, not the least bit angry. Snowy roads are hard to travel. Be careful. Rhea frowned. Still mounted, she circled him once and asked, "Are people from the Central Plains all as fake as you?" He clearly didn't want to deal with her, yet he still had to wear that gentle, friendly face. Julian replied evenly, "In any case, the Central Plains doesn't have girls like you. I've heard the girls in the Central Plains are all delicate and weak. I don't want to be like them." Rhea snorted, her eyes sharp and wild. "Hey, sickly one. Want to compete?" Julian lifted his chin to meet her gaze. After a long moment, he asked, "What does the princess want to compete in?" "Hunting." Days of heavy snow had buried every trail on Mount Buren. The horses fought through the drifts. Before long, Rhea simply left her mount behind, slung her quiver over her back, and went on foot. Seeing that, Julian dismounted too. He followed behind her, stumbling through the snow. Rhea glanced at his face, white as the snow, and curled her lip. "Don't die out here." Julian pressed his lips together and said nothing. Rhea caught a new firmness in that bloodless face. Her heart gave a jolt. She quickly looked away, but her gaze snagged on the satin boots at his feet, soaked through. She couldn't help frowning. In the Beishi Nation, everyone wears young deer hide boots. You don't have any? Then she remembered that when Julian's group first arrived, Leo had eagerly handed out deer hide boots to his men. Rhea suddenly didn't know what to say, but when she saw Julian's expression, like he understood everything, irritation rose in her again. She lashed her whip hard at a nearby tree. Snow shook loose in a rush, briefly cutting off their view of each other. In that split second, she tossed out a quick line in the Beishi tongue. In the swirl of falling white, Julian went rigid. Then, in the next instant, he lunged for her. "Watch out!" Julian wrapped Rhea in his arms. The two of them tumbled together across the snow again and again. By the time they finally stopped, a long smear of blood had already spread over the white ground. "Wolves!" Julian's shoe woke at midnight. Outside it seemed to be snowing again, soft and steady. He stared up at the crown of the tent and could almost hear the flakes settling on the felt roof. He tried to sit up, but the instant he moved, pain ripped through his wounds. A muffled groan slipped out. Just as he was about to lie back down, a shadow stirred in the darkness. Rhea rubbed her eyes and lit the candle stand inside the tent. Half asleep, she asked, "What's wrong?" Julian Shu startled. He clearly hadn't expected her to be here, keeping watch. After a long pause, he rasped, "The princess is here." "I was afraid you'd die," Rhea muttered. Then she flopped down beside the bed, yawned, and said, "You can't die." Julian Shu leaned in, listening. But after that one sentence, the girl fell silent. Only her bright, colorful braids spilled across the bedding, half of them pressed against the back of Julian Shu's hand. He watched her for a while. He meant to pull his hand away, but the girl, sleeping like the dead, took advantage. She shifted and nestled her face right into his palm. He froze. After a long time, the corners of his mouth slowly lifted. Julian Shu's recovery lasted into late winter. The snow gradually melted, and a faint green began to show. Spring was coming to the Beishi Nation. Rhea couldn't sit still. Every day she ran wild. One moment picking a few flowers on Mount Buren, the next catching fish at Lake Atamu. Then she would present them to Julian Shu like treasures and ask, "Do you like them?" Julian Shu always said he did first, then warned her, "This season, it's easiest to run into snakes and wild beasts. Princess, don't go running around." Rhea stole a glance at him. For once, she actually listened. She sat down close beside him and said, "Back then, you didn't have to shield me. Back then on Mount Buren, when they ran into wolves, Julian Shu shielded Rhea twice, once taking a wound at the shoulder blade and once at the waist and abdomen." Julian Shu's expression hardened. "Girls shouldn't be left with scars." "Why not?" Rhea pushed up her sleeve to show him. "I've got a scar on my hand." That strip of pale skin made Julian Shu awkward in a way he rarely was. He looked away. "Princess, girls can't just show their skin. You people from the Central Plains have so many rules." Rhea snorted. Then she asked, "Are the girls in the Central Plains pretty?" Julian Shu nodded. Rhea's mood dimmed, but girls of the Beishi Nation were bold by nature. She asked again, "Then do you have someone you like?" Seeing the open hope in her eyes, Julian Shu paused. After a moment, he said softly, "No." Rhea's eyes lit up at once. The two of them sat on a low earthen mound. It was evening, and moonlight mingled with the lingering snow. Rhea couldn't keep quiet. She tilted her head and asked, "Between the Baishi Nation and the Central Plains, whose moon is prettier?" Julian Shu sighed. "Princess, the moon is the same everywhere." Rhea thought for a bit. "Then don't go back to the Central Plains. The Baishi Nation might not be as rich as the Central Plains, but the Baishi people never treated human beings like livestock to be shipped back and forth." Julian Shu fell silent for a moment. Then he smiled again and asked, "Back on Mount Buran, did you curse me in Baishi?" Rhea was guileless. The moment he changed the subject, she followed along. Eyes wide, she asked, "You understand Baishi?" "When I was sick, I had nothing to do, so I learned a line or two." Rhea jumped up like a little mouse caught stealing honey. She stammered, but still tried to act tough. I cursed you, so what? You never said anything. No wonder Leo bullied you." In the moonlight, Julian Shu's gaze slowly brightened. He laughed softly and said, "All right, from now on, I'll tell you everything." Rhea froze. Her heart began to race, and she fled in a panic. After the awakening of insects, her father transferred half the troops under his banner. He split them into 10 units and sent them along Mount Buran to search for new pasture land. Leo led 1 unit, heading northwest, but he didn't even make it over Mount Green before he started whining about the cold and rode back on his own. Her father was furious and lashed him twice. But the moment he turned away, Leo came grinning to find Rhea. At the time, Rhea was having Julian Shu teach her to identify medicinal herbs. Leaves, branches, and roots covered the table. She'd finally managed to remember a few when Leo burst in and startled her so badly she forgot everything at once. Rhea scowled, grabbed a handful, and threw it at him. "All you ever think about is the girls in the tribe. The other day, Sister Maya even had a daughter. Want her?" "No need for that." Leo's skin was always thick. He flipped his fur robe aside and sat next to Rhea, but his eyes kept circling Julian Shu. What's he doing here? They'd been speaking Baishi from the start. It wasn't clear whether Julian Shu understood, but he seemed to catch the probing look in Leo's eyes. As soon as Leo finished asking, Julian Shu stood and bowed. "I'll take my leave." Leo hated formalities most of all. He propped his chin on his hand and clicked his tongue, muttering in Baishi, "Hypocrite." Rhea shot him a glare. After he quieted down, she turned back to Julian Shu, unhappy. "But I still haven't memorized these. What am I supposed to do?" "It's fine, you can learn later." Julian Shu smiled gently. He bowed once more, then lifted the tent flap and left. Rhea sat back down obediently. She stared at the place where Julian Shu had gone, lost in thought. By the time she remembered that sly Leo was still in the tent, it was too late. "It's not impossible," Leo said, tapping the table slowly with his forefinger. The usual lift at the corner of his mouth vanished. "But Rhea, have you thought about it? He may not stay in the Baishi Nation." Rhea didn't understand. "But people from the Central Plains treat him badly. They sent him to the Baishi Nation. Why would he go back?" Leo sighed, rubbed her head, and spoke in a rarely serious tone. "If one day your father and brothers became useless and had to send you off to a foreign land, would you resent us?" Rhea froze and lowered her head. After a while, stubbornness rose again and she muttered, "Don't people from the Central Plains care about heirs? If I have his child, maybe he won't leave." At that, Leo stabbed a finger hard into her forehead and cursed through clenched teeth. "You're this bewitched by a man from the Central Plains? So much for your prospects." But very soon, Leo realized Rhea's prospects weren't small at all. They were enormous. At dusk, the servant assigned to watch Julian Shu came rushing in to report that he was gone. After grilling him, they learned the servant had been lazy. After Julian Shu left Rhea's tent and said he was going to pick more herbs, the man stopped watching and went to sleep in the stables. Leo heard this and didn't panic. He only yawned and said to Rhea, "See? What did I tell you?" Rhea said nothing. Only when half an hour passed with no sign of him did she tuck a riding whip into her belt. "I'll go look." Leo stopped her. "It's about to snow. If you go out now, you might not find him. And you might not make it back either." Rhea didn't listen. She snapped her whip, the tip brushing Leo's face. While he was caught off guard, she grabbed a horse and rode off. Snow was already falling like drifting down. Leo stormed to the entrance and tried to chase her, but the vast curtain of white swallowed everything. He couldn't see her at all. After she learned Julian Shu had gone south, Rhea rode hard in that direction. The wind and snow wouldn't let up. It cut her face like knives. She galloped for over an hour before she could just barely make out the full outline of Mount Light through the storm. Only then did she start to feel cold. Beyond Mount Light lay the road back to the Central Plains. She tugged her felt hat down over her temples and turned her horse around. She rode back much more slowly than she'd come. Maybe the horse was tired, or maybe she was. Rider and mount trudged through the snow. Around the Hour of the Pig, as she passed a stretch of desert near the traitor, she caught sight of a warm glow. A fire nestled between rocks. In that firelight was a clear, familiar face. Only then did the taut string in her chest finally loosen. As Julian Shu looked up in surprise, she toppled from the saddle. Afterward, Leo joked, "This is a first, that fragile body of yours that can be knocked over by a breeze, yet you managed to carry him back from the traitor." Rhea's face flushed. She twisted her fingers in the deerskin felt and argued stubbornly, "The traitor isn't that far from here. Stop acting cute after you got what you wanted." Leo snorted, "Lie in bed and behave. Your hands and feet nearly froze. Don't go running to other tents. In a few days, the people searching for pasture will bring news. When the time comes with your bad legs and how heavy you are, who's gonna want to drag you along? I've already told people to look after him properly. Don't worry, he won't die that easily." Rhea didn't like hearing that. Her lips stuck out far enough to hang a kettle. "Who's heavy? And he's still unconscious. What if he never wakes up?" Leo shrugged, indifferent. "Then it's just his fate." Rhea was so furious she threw a horn-shaped pillow straight at him. Leo caught it quickly, hugged it to his chest, and sat by her bed again. His expression turned grim. "How did he end up in the traitor? Did you ask him?" Rhea still hadn't calmed down. She glared at Leo. "The plants there aren't the same as on the pasture. He said he wanted to find more kinds to teach me. He wandered too far. On the way back, he got caught in the blizzard." "You believe that?" "Why wouldn't I?" Rhea pouted. "When I found him, there were piles of roots and stems around him." Leo clicked his tongue and tugged her braid. "What's that saying in the Central Plains? A girl grows up and won't stay. I say you should just get married already." Rhea had been thinking that once Julian Shu woke up, she would tell her father. Her father always doted on her, he wouldn't refuse. But before she could even speak, news arrived from the Central Plains. They offered 1,000 bolts of silk and 100 chests of jewels in exchange for Julian Shu. When her father demanded a son of the Shu family as a hostage, he'd only meant to disgust the great general, who had long been an enemy of the Baishi. But now Julian Shu's fever wouldn't break, and he lay unconscious. No one even knew if he would survive. He no longer had any value as a hostage. So when the Central Plains named their price, her father agreed at once. By the time Rhea heard, people from the Central Plains had already come to take him. Leo was put in charge of stopping her. She lashed him with her whip. Leo was fine, but Rhea's frostbitten hand split open instead, cracking into bloody fissures. "If you chase after him now, do you think he'll take you with him?" Leo forced himself to be cruel. "Rhea, you know he never promised you anything. When you ran out of your mind to find him, he might have been trying to avoid you so he could contact people from the Central Plains and have them take him home." "I don't believe you. I'm gonna find him." The moment she said it, the tent flap lifted. The person she wanted to find walked in, step by step. Julian Shu's face was still flushed. When he spoke, he kept his voice low, forcing his cough back down into his chest. "Today, I came to bid the princess farewell." Rhea sucked in a few ragged breaths. With her bleeding finger, she pointed at Leo and demanded of Julian Shu, "Did you hear what he just said?" Julian Shu lowered his eyes and nodded. Rhea clenched her teeth. "He said that day you ran off on purpose to contact people from the Central Plains. Is it true?" "Yes." Wind slipped in through the gap in the tent flap that hadn't fully fallen closed. Julian Shu swallowed another cough, then clasped his hands toward Rhea. "Thank you for the princess's care these past days. I don't deserve it. In the future, I only wish the princess good health and joy year after year." Pain throbbed from the back of Rhea's hand. She swallowed the sob in her throat and laughed. "You don't deserve it." What a line. 2 months after Julian Shu left, Princess Eleanor was with child. This princess from the Central Plains was a proper young lady. Aside from a brief appearance 3 months earlier, when the whole tribe moved to new pasture land, she stayed in her own tent nearly all the time. Rhea was the opposite. After Julian Shu left, she grew even more unruly. One moment she'd steal someone's lamb. The next, she'd chase the horse herds across the plain. It was as if that failed first love had never happened. The herders suffered for it. They didn't dare hit her or scold her, so they complained to the Khan in private. Once enough people complained, it became a real problem. In the 5th month after Julian Shu left, when the Baishi's grass was at its tenderest and the game at its fattest, Rhea was confined. They called it confinement, but really it meant moving her into Princess Eleanor's tent and ordering her to learn proper feminine calm from a princess of the Central Plains. By then, Eleanor was over 4 months pregnant. No matter how unwilling Rhea was, she couldn't make trouble with someone expecting a child. So the confinement did have some effect. Rhea quieted down. As time passed, Rhea realized her father was determined to discipline her this time. Slowly, she became willing to talk with Eleanor. Eleanor didn't speak much. Usually Rhea asked and Eleanor answered. Rhea didn't ask for anything else, mostly just about customs and daily life in the Central Plains. But Eleanor had been raised in the inner chambers since childhood. She didn't know much about those things either. After asking a few times, Rhea tactfully switched to other questions. Days flowed by like water. Eleanor's belly grew larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, the Baishi entered winter again. By now, Rhea had gotten used to stopping by Eleanor's tent every day, just to look at the unborn little brother or sister. Eleanor praised her for being kind-hearted. Leo scoffed and said Rhea's brain must have been kicked by a horse. Then, in the 1st month of the following year, Eleanor gave birth. She brought a little prince into the Baishi. The Khan, who hadn't shown his face in a long time, finally went to sit in Eleanor's tent. No one knew what they discussed. After the Khan left, Eleanor called Rhea in and pressed a letter into her hands. This letter, please deliver it to the Central Plains. After childbirth, Eleanor was terribly weak. She spoke in broken phrases, but Rhea understood. If you miss him, go see him. If you don't want to see him, then go look for me. Tell me whether the peach blossoms by the Ming River have bloomed, all right? Rhea accepted the second half. Then I'll break off a branch and bring it back for you. But she knew what she truly wanted was the first half. She liked things to have a clear beginning and end. So she wanted to see Julian Shu and ask him. Back then, in the Baishi Nation, had he truly never felt anything for her? If he said yes, she would never think of him again. So the procession bearing good news braved the Baishi's bitter wind and snow. They crossed Mount Light, reached Heaven's Gate Pass, then passed the Northern River Gorge. After more than half a month on the road, they finally arrived in the royal capital of the Central Plains. The royal capital at the start of the 2nd month. The royal capital lay south of the river. Even in winter, the weather was mild. Even the wind felt gentle. Wrapped in fox fur, Rhea felt sweat bead at the tip of her nose. When someone helped her down from the carriage, a man up ahead bowed to her. Perhaps because he still hadn't fully recovered, his voice was hoarse, carrying a helpless edge. "Welcome, Princess Rhea he." Rhea's smile was only half-formed when she heard that form of address. Her face fell. She ground her teeth and snapped. "Julian Shu." The story of the great general's sickly youngest son being whipped in the street by a Baishi princess soon spread through every alley of the royal capital. Julian Shu might be frail, but his family background spoke for itself. He was handsome and his talent was renowned. Countless girls admired him. After Rhea was brought into the palace, 7 or 8 maids kept stealing glances at her. That was nothing compared to the noble ladies, all hidden barbs and smiling poison, who mocked her at every turn. This was someone else's territory. Rhea couldn't make a bloody mess over petty spats. Still, she felt stifled. After enduring it for several days, she chose a dark, wind-blown night, climbed the palace wall, and broke into the Shu residence. Julian Shu lay on a couch with a book. When Rhea made a slight sound on the roof, he didn't panic. Instead, he blew out the lamp, set the book beside his pillow and sighed. "Come down, don't fall." Rhea thought it took all the fun out of it, but she obediently climbed down from the roof and slipped in through the window. The room was pitch black. After feeling around and sinking into a chair, she asked, "Why did you put out the light?" Julian's shoe was patient. "This isn't the Baishi nation. If someone sees you coming into my room in the middle of the night, it'll ruin your reputation." Rhea pouted and muttered, "I'm not afraid." After that, there was nothing to say. The room fell silent. Later, Rhea could understand why Julian Shu longed to return home. Still, resentment festered in her. Seeing him act as if he didn't want to talk, anger rose again. She swung her hand, stood up, and walked out. Behind her, he sighed again. "Princess, where are you going?" "None of your business." Rhea flung the words over her shoulder and climbed out the way she'd come. Outside the wall ran a long street, deserted at this hour. She could only hear the distant clack of the night watchman's wooden blocks. There wasn't a soul in sight. Rhea was always brave, but now even she felt fear creep in. She crouched beneath the stone lion by the Shu residence gate and wiped her tears in secret. She'd come all this way to the Central Plains just to suffer. Maybe her brain really had been kicked by a horse. Then the vermilion gate of the Shu residence creaked open. Moments later, a cloak settled lightly over her shoulders. "Stop crying." Rhea sniffed. Her chest felt sour and tight. She looked up at the man before her, so thin, so frail, and asked, her voice hurt, "Have the peach blossoms by the Ming River bloomed?" Eleanor said, "They're beautiful." "They are." Julian Shu sat on the stone steps beside her. "But the peach blossoms by the Ming River bloom in the 3rd month. Rhea rubbed her eyes dry and counted the days in her head. "Disappointed," she said, "but we'll be leaving for the Baishi nation in a few days." The imperial family had been considerate and granted them extra days to rest. Eleanor's baby would have his full month celebration in the 2nd month. Rhea's group would travel light on the way back and could make it in time even if they rested a few days first. Meanwhile, the imperial procession, burdened with gifts, moved more slowly. They had already departed. Julian Shu turned to look at her, as if weighing something. After a long while, he said, "Princess, would you be willing to stay in the Central Plains for the rest of your life?" Rhea froze. Before she could answer, he went on, "Would you be willing to betray your people, leave the shelter of Mount Biren, and spend your whole life trapped behind inner walls? To see nothing but a scrap of sky above a tiny courtyard, would you be willing to stay in the Central Plains like that?" Under the eaves, a lantern swayed in the night wind. Its warm orange light was dim, illuminating only a small square of ground. Beyond it, darkness spread like ink. Rhea went still, caught in Julian Shu's sudden, urgent questions. Questions that sounded almost ordinary. Would she? "You wouldn't, Rhea. Even if it seems like nothing now, you'll regret it one day." Julian Shu gave her the answer. It was the first time he'd called her by name, yet sorrow filled every word. "You are a princess of the Baishi nation. Your soul is freer than anyone's. You were born there, and you should die there. When you die, what stays with you will be the snow on Mount Biren, the horse herds on the grassland, and the eagles circling the sky. Not a lonely, cold grave where they won't even bother to carve your name, only to tell later generations you were the wife of someone from some clan. While there's still time, Rhea, let me take you back to the Baishi nation. All right?" At first, Rhea didn't understand what Julian Shu meant by, "there's still time." She thought he had simply grown tired of her. In a fit of pride, she refused him outright. By the time she realized his true meaning, it was far too late. In early February, 5 days after the emissaries from the Central Plains had departed, Rhea and her retinue prepared for their own journey home. They hadn't even passed through the palace gates when the imperial guards surrounded them. After that, Rhea was locked away in solitude. As for the others who had traveled with her, her people, their fates were unknown. Princess Eleanor had once told her that the imperial palace of the Central Plains had many abandoned residences known as cold palaces. Dark, freezing, and choked with weeds, they were places that reeked of despair. At the time, Rhea had thought Eleanor was exaggerating. Surely, no place could be so dark and cold that the sun could never reach it. But now, imprisoned here, she finally understood. To cry out and know that no one is willing to listen. That was true despair. Rhea shouted until her throat was raw. She beat on the door until her hands swelled. When she had no strength left, she fell silent. Curled up in a corner draped with cobwebs, she counted the nights as they fell. On the 21st sunset, someone finally came. Someone other than the old woman who brought her daily meals. He gripped her hand tight, guiding her past the guards' patrols and out of the palace. Outside the walls waited a jujube red horse, much like the one Rhea often rode back in the Baishi nation. When she swung into the saddle, it turned its head and nuzzled her softly. On the third day, it dropped dead from exhaustion. Rhea had no time to mourn it. Using the token he'd given her, she traded for a second horse at a post station. Without a backward glance, she spurred her new mount on through the Hexi corridor, racing toward Janye. By the sixth day, her third horse since leaving the Central Plains also died. It fell in the Chidar, collapsing amidst the carcasses of countless war horses. Scattered among them were the blood-stained bones of countless Baishi people. She wanted to bury them all, but there were too many. She could never dig enough graves. So she turned them over one by one, tearing strips of cloth to cover their faces, to keep the vultures from pecking out their eyes. Rhea couldn't understand. It was supposed to be the full-month celebration for the child of a Central Plains princess. She had truly believed Eleanor was good, and that Julian's shoe was good too. Yet in the end, this is what it had all come to. She remembered something she had overheard during her 21 nights of captivity, the mocking words of noble ladies beyond her prison wall. One of them said, "Young Master Shu laid low for months, playing along and negotiating with that Rhea he was just waiting to make his move, tracking the movements of the Baishi army. He learned exactly how many men and horses they send out each spring to find new pastures. That's what made this plan possible, using the full-month celebration as a cover to secretly dispatch our elite troops." Another said, "Eleanor truly endured great humiliation. The moment she was told to get pregnant, she did, right on schedule, though who knows whose child it really is. Still, she's certainly earned her reward. Her status will be completely different now. She won't have to live in a cold palace anymore. And it's laughable, isn't it? The Baishi nation actually thought they could use this child to curry favor, going on about royal bloodlines and noble birth. As if they don't realize that with Baishi blood, the child is nothing but common." Leo had always said the people of the Central Plains were full of lies. He had not been wrong. Night fell again. Black clouds pressed low, brewing a fierce blizzard. Rhea lost track of how long she spent turning over the dead. In that time, she found her father's corpse. She found Sister Maya, who had just given birth to a daughter. She found a tiny, lifeless baby boy. She was still searching for Leo when the men from the Central Plains arrived, their blades still stained with blood. Rhea was imprisoned again. This time, they shoved her into a prison cart surrounded by wooden bars, the kind the Baishi used to pen livestock. They traveled south, following the very route Rhea and her people had once taken with such joy on their way to the Central Plains, over Mount Light, to Heaven's Gate Pass, and across the Northern River Gorge. It was as if the sky itself mourned for the Baishi. The blizzard raged without pause for 2 days. On the third day, as the storm howled on, a figure appeared through the wind and snow. When Rhea saw Julian's shoe, she felt nothing at all. She merely glanced at him before lowering her head, her face a blank mask. Julian's shoe was wrapped in a fur cloak, its white trim making his brows and eyes seem even more sharply defined. He stood there casually, yet still carried an air that no one dared slight, the very same young Master Shu who had masterminded the annihilation of the Baishi. He waved away the men guarding the prison cart. He drew his hands from his sleeves, revealing a brightly gleaming dagger. He asked, "Do you have anything to say?" Rhea thought for a moment. "I hope that in my next life, I never meet you again." Julian Shu nodded. He forced down the metallic sweetness in his throat and said softly, "All right." From later histories, the Shu family had a son, Julian Shu, who offered a strategy to break the Baishi. The royal army returned to court victorious on the 7th day of the 3rd month, having captured the Baishi princess. On the 9th day, a great blizzard rose. Julian Shu met the royal army at Mount Light. When the snows ceased, the princess was dead, and Julian Shu was nowhere to be found.